have known for a very long time. So there was really a level of intimacy. I would also say, being again an insider, it meant it was not only the closeness of, getting a feedback that I have put too much weight, or that I would need to do something with my life, which is really a sign of intimacy for me, not at all criticism. But it was also the fact that they felt that they needed to, in a way, not control, but they wanted to have their say in this research. So at first, when I went, although I have known a lot of people who have gone through that experience, I didn't quite know how many women would really want me to interview them, because they were sort of done with speaking out about that. So and it was always like, she would, I would go and visit someone, and then we would go home, and they would drop me off wherever I was staying, usually with a friend. So that was part of, I wouldn't say the control, but part of knowing where I am, or they were concerned about my safety as well. So then she'd say, oh, this is your next person that you would interview, or things like that. It was not always that way, but that's, so there is really sort of the trust element was extremely important. I don't know why it was from And here I'm talking about the coding, the coding of interviews, because there is a lot of data. So I'm really looking here about, again, where these women came from, and then what was their education, how did they, and for instance, Iris told me, well, my mom really wanted our teacher to give a better grade to the son, not to me, but I was a better student. There is also no accident that there is more women who have a PhD in Bosnia than men. And Kosovo women are also highly educated. They're also, again, I'm here talking again about the common knowledge culture, about folklore, jokes, and popular music. And as Mariana was here, who was featured in that movie previously, and she was in the United States for a year doing some research, and we had a theater group, Balkan Women Theater Group in New York City. And Mariana said to the workshop leader, Mariana was always late. And she said, in Bosnia we say only a dead man is late. Okay, so you just forget about timing and things like that. So there was a lot of those things. So again, I'm talking about the trigger event. And why I'm using that term, it comes from Stephen Brookfield, and it is the trigger of something that has happened. Some other people call it the disorienting dilemmas. So their time in exile was and refuge. It was the time that they would say is when the trigger happened. So here I have just a flavor of some stories that definitely the effects of trauma are everywhere. There is also something that you can feel as a generational trauma. The sexual violence has happened in other wars previously in this same area. So there is, they all would say, and I'm quoting here one woman, to be an insider in the organizing and lobbying process, especially the issues I care about, like violence against women, trafficking, or finding funding for a shelter in Kosovo. This is a Kosovo woman, to make sure that women's votes count, and we have 30% of female representatives in our local municipalities. So women's empowerment, it's something that has really grown out of their own experience and learning at that time. I'm talking a lot about cultural subjectivities and differences of growing up between Muslim women and other women groups. And this really comes across through one of the findings which I really described why it was so interesting that most of these centers that were run, they were run by women only. And how important that is, particularly particularly Muslim culture that is very close and isolated, to really trust, that women trust one another, more so than in other cultures in the Balkans. So I may be doing again more research about looking, is there a sort of interconnectivity between feminism and isolated women's cultures, but that's a different story. So that's maybe from, here I'm talking about syncretism, and syncretism is really, it comes from the island of Crete, right? So it's just because there is a lot of different cultures. And the first person who used it in the Balkans in terms of exploring Muslim culture is Norris. Norris wrote a book in 1993, was published. It's entitled Islam in Balkans. And he believes that most of at the beginning, that the people were going back and forth between accepting various religions, including Islam. And he believes that women were the ones who were accepting Islam quicker than men were. That it was, he really moves away from beliefs that it had to do with property issues. He really puts it in a place that there was something more in the spirituality of Islam at that time that was coming to the Balkans that was very different. He's studying Sufism as well in Eastern Europe, and it's a very interesting study, and I found it very important. If you are talking ever to a woman from the Balkans, she's always going, in particular the Muslim women, she's always going to be very superstitious, and you don't know why, and everything is sort of interrelated. So Norris really talks, if you are just in terms of beliefs, that particular belief that everything is interrelated, so that's a particularly important belief among Muslims as such, and that's also present in the Balkans. So he doesn't necessarily question whether, even though there was a communist era, but just in terms of believing into oneness of being is the way how he describes it, and believing that everything in nature is really related to another. Just that type of belief that's also grounded in the sort of pagan belief that already existed in the culture were syncretism, as he understands it. And I felt that this was extremely important to really deal with that. I also do recommend, other than to read Tiger's Wife, which is Thea Obrock's work. This is a very young and brilliant writer from Belgrade, whose grandmother is also from Bosnia. But she's studying vampires and things like that. But it's absolutely that. My thesis advisor, Richard Applebaum, said, I have been listening to you for such a long time, and I also understand now that book as well.